phones of Michael Cohen, President Trump's longtime personal attorney, citing two separate sources with knowledge of the legal proceedings involving Cohen. But we've got a correction to that now. It's not a wiretap where they're listening into the phone calls, but something else specifically. Let me bring in my colleague Tom Winter here to explain. There's always a difference here when you hear the words wiretap and surveillance, and the level of detail of the surveillance. Sometimes it's monitoring when a phone call comes in. Sometimes it's overhearing. Explain what we reported and what we now know.
So, Chuck, based on information from two independent sources who have a long-term track record of credibility in providing accurate information to this news organization, earlier today, based on that information, we reported that there was a wiretap on Michael Cohen's phone, meaning that they were able to listen into conversations from phone lines associated with Michael Cohen to any other person that he might have talked to. And in part of that reporting, we said one of those phone calls was between a phone line associated with Michael Cohen and the White House. Now, three senior U.S. officials are telling us that it was not a wiretap. Instead, it was what is referred to as a pen register. In plain English, that means it's a log of phone calls that were made from a specific phone line or specific phone lines. In this case, we know Michael Cohen had several phone lines. And so in this case, they were able to see who he called or who somebody using his phone lines called, but they were not able to listen in real time or record those conversations. So it's an important distinction, Chuck. I want to add to that by saying that it doesn't change necessarily the legal bar here in order to get a warrant of this type. It's still a very serious matter because they would have needed to fill out a significant affidavit and be able to go down a significant road to get this approved by a federal judge.
Essentially, to bring back a phrase that we used to use a lot during the Snowden revelations and, frankly, during the investigation in the Boston Marathon, this is metadata.
Exactly.
Meaning he's being surveilled, but they're trying to figure out who he's talking to, not necessarily what he's talking about.
Right. So this would be as if I was going to call you earlier today to get caught up. They would see Tom Winter's phone call. They would see my number and see that I dialed Chuck Todd. They would not know what you and I said to each other. We could have talked about everything and anything. And to your point with respect to metadata, that's exactly what this is. It's a phone number. It's a time. And based upon what we've been told by three U.S. officials that earlier the reporting was too far, that there was some sort of a wiretap here where there was real-time monitoring. In this case, they were just able to see that somebody called somebody else. And
do we know the extent right now? Because there's been some filings, and you and I were talking about this. The government has admitted to some surveillance that they've been doing for months over Cohen, but we don't know the extent. Do we know the extent of how much they've been surveilling Cohen? How thoroughly? Has it been emails, texts, phone calls? Like, what do we know?
So, Chuck, it's a great question. So we know from public filings that they were able to do surveillance on his emails. The federal prosecutors put that in open court. Anybody that with access or wants to get the record can get it themselves. And for that, they had a filter team because obviously there could be attorney-client communications within that. And so they had a separate team look at it and then hand over the relevant materials to the investigators that are working on the case. So we know for a fact it's emails. We're being told now that this is some sort of a pen register that was being used. So we know that, what calls he may have been making or people using his phone lines were making. Now, as part of this, could there be other types of things that were monitored real time as it relates to communications? Obviously. Right. Everybody now uses text. They use various types of apps to communicate. That's something that we haven't yet seen come out, and that's something that we haven't been guided to or told explicitly at this point.
All right, Tom Winter, coming on here, important correction to our earlier report that we know has gotten some big headlines.